All right, our next presenter for today's session is Tehani Montaron. She's an environmental studies major who is also graduating this spring, 2015. The title of her presentation is Obstacles to Offshore Renewable Energy Development. She worked with Jonathan Whiting and Andrew Coping at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, as well as her faculty advisor on campus, Kiki Jenkins. With that, I will turn it over to John.
So as Sean said, today I'm going to be discussing the obstacles to offshore renewable energy development. And this is because today there is a huge need for implementation of renewable energy because of climate change caused from carbon dioxide emissions. Climate change has a lot of negative effects. Some of these include sea level rise, weather extremes, loss of biodiversity, wildfires, and drought, among many other things. And a shocking 80% of carbon dioxide emissions from humans comes from the burning of fossil fuels for energy. And if we hope to reduce these effects, we're going to have to begin to implement renewable energy. Several sources offshore that we can look into are wind, wave, and tidal. These sources have a lot of potential. Wave energy is available 90% of the time. Tidal energy is available 100% of the time. And all three of them have a very predictable megawatt output so that they'll be easily worked into the grid. So with all these possible possibilities, why aren't we using these technologies as often as we could and should be? To figure this out, I posed the question, what are the obstacles to widespread adoption of offshore renewable energy? And to figure this out, I did several things. I interned at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, or PNNL. I conducted a literature review of over 20 articles, and I conducted a survey amongst locals that had 33 responses. So first of all, for my internship, I worked mainly on a website called TEFIS. TEFIS is a website that hosts environmental data on the effects of offshore renewable energy technologies. In addition to this, it serves as a commons for field practitioners so that they can further the connectedness of the offshore renewable energy community. There are several features of TEFIS that are very helpful for users. TEFIS content is where you're going to find the map viewer and the TEFIS knowledge base. And here you can filter based on a variety of parameters as well as by location. Under connections, you're going to be able to find all of the organizations involved with offshore renewable energy, as well as other things such as other databases and regulatory information. Under the Broadcasts tab, you can find upcoming webinars hosted on the site, as well as conferences and other like things. If you register to become a member, you can connect with and communicate with other users of the site. For those of you who are new to offshore renewable energy, it also has several tabs located at the bottom here, the MHK and offshore wind. MHK stands for marine and hydrokinetic, and that's going to be the wave and tidal energies. And it has just general information on those technologies. Here, Annex 4 and REN are international collaboratives that are working to resolve the environmental effects of offshore renewable energy devices. My responsibilities with TEFIS was to find and add new relevant information to the site, create the organization pages under connections, and then create the REN database as well. I was also in charge of creating and maintaining the social media pages for the site. So, although I learned a lot personally about the issues involved with offshore renewable energy by working with the information on TEFIS, in order to further answer my research question, I had to pose a survey to figure out what other people were concerned about. And for this, I found that economics was the main concern that people had, followed by environmental effects, having no concern, and then concerns with the technology. So what exactly are the economic problems that we're facing with offshore renewable energy development? Well, with wave and tidal energy, currently the break-even costs are out of reach. This is due to expensive technology on one hand and lack of funding options on the other. Wind energy, on the other hand, is much further along. Here in the United States, the Department of Energy recently decided to fund $47 million worth of projects, one off the coast of Oregon, New Jersey, and Virginia. It hopes to have these demonstration projects in the water as early as 2017. Outside of the United States, though, there are already several operational offshore wind farms, and in Europe there's some grid connection arrays that have been going since 1991. So since economics has always been a problem with offshore renewable energy, I wanted to see if people would be willing to pay to have a renewable energy project such as this in their area. And it turned out that 80% of people would actually be willing to pay a monthly renewable energy tax to have an offshore development in their area. Only 20% of people said that no, they would not be willing to pay. And if you can see on the graph here, the majority of people said either $2 or 50 cents, followed by 10 cents, 25 cents, and then $1 would be their willingness. So the second thing that people were most concerned about is the environmental effects that these devices can have. These mainly deal with bird and bat strike when talking about the wind energy, and all three will have interactions with fish and marine mammals, ecosystem interactions, acoustic effects, chemical effects, and then electromagnetic field effects. My literature review also revealed several key social obstacles that we'll need to surmount if we want offshore renewable energy to be successful. First of all, conflicts with ocean users is a problem. People that are currently using the ocean for things like recreation or fishing, they are concerned that if a device is placed in the water in the area where they are using it, that they will no longer be able to use that for their purposes. And this has caused resistance in several scenarios. There's also a lack of government framework, especially here in the United States. This is due to mainly the newness of the technology. There's no firm regulations in place allowing for testing in the open waters. Also, stakeholder action or lack of action has been a problem. Stakeholders hold opposition for several reasons, and sometimes people like to say NIMBY as a reason for opposition by stakeholders. NIMBYism stands for not in my backyard. As many of you probably know, this mainly means that although you may support the technology, you just don't want it where you can see it. I found, though, that when dealing with offshore renewable energy, one should instead discuss place theory. This is for several reasons. One, NIMBYism can be used to discredit well-founded objections by local residents. Also, it is too simplistic and only focuses on objection instead of including responses that are positive or neutral. Place theory instead includes multiple levels of response, starting with identification, proceeding to interpretation, evaluation, coping, and then acting. So even with all of these obstacles that there could be to renewable energy development, I found an overwhelming support for renewable energy technologies. In my survey, there was only a 3% negative response to people wanting to have an offshore renewable energy development. This means that there was an 88% of people that had a positive or a very positive reaction to offshore renewable energy. So with this knowledge, how can we move forward and how can we implement developments? First of all, we're going to need to conduct additional research. Technology was a main concern amongst survey respondents, and if we are able to improve technology, we also will be able to improve economics, which was the #1 concern. Improvement of government framework will also need to happen in order to make this possible. If we allow for testing, we will be able to improve our technology. Funding alternatives, such as the tax that I mentioned, will also need to be looked at in order to fund these technologies. And finally, we're going to need to educate our potential stakeholders so that they can have informed responses to offshore renewable energy developments. If we are able to do all of these things, we will be able to surmount these obstacles and eventually have grid-connected offshore renewable energy developments, which will lead to reduction of carbon dioxide emissions and reduction of climate change. I'd like to thank my site supervisors, Andrea Coping and Jonathan Whiting, my faculty advisors, Kiki Jenkins and Stacia Dreyer, my parents, Tracy and Jill Beltran, and my grandparents, Doug and Bonnie Roy.